And so for Bolingbroke to have the stronger claim, he has to abandon the English monarchy's claim to France, and that's absolutely unthinkable. So Bolingbroke's claim to the throne is weak, and he knew it. And so he called Parliament to approve his claim, which it did. Now, Edmund Mortimer never, as it happens, showed any interest in his own claim until he died in 1425, but as we said, his claim is taken up by the Yorkists, in particular Richard, Duke of York. Now, when it came down to it, after 1399, was that it suddenly became that any prince of the blood who had the money to raise an army and a cause for dissatisfaction with the king could become a contender for the throne. A dangerous precedent had been set by Henry Bolingbroke. Henry Bolingbroke seizes Richard II and starves him to death, so that there's no marks on his body of violence, and then gets Parliament to approve the fact that he is king. He has let a genie out of the bottle, and in particular what he has now is like Pandora's box in its way. He has let the idea that anybody with power, well, with an army might suddenly be able to become king. Now he gets himself crowned and he becomes Henry IV of England, and he reigns from 1399 to 1413. Now what was Bolingbroke, or Henry IV as he's now called, what was he like? Now when young he was the flower of chivalry. Now according to the historian Pollard, he was a revolutionary who seized the throne and successfully held it. Now he's a great people person. His reign was held through personal affinity. People got on with Henry IV, which they didn't do with Richard II. Now he upheld partial justice. He favoured his own factions and his own friends rather than the law. He, however, also brought chaos to the Anglo-Scottish border by abandoning cross-border tribunals where the English and Scottish governments would talk to each other about what was happening on the border, which meant you could go and commit a crime in Scotland and then just come to the English side of the border for safety, and vice versa. But the king's faction did not act excessively. And so again, if we listen to Pollard, there appeared to be a greater concern for probity and the common good than a generation earlier. As it happens, Henry IV accepted criticism without rancour. Oh, you couldn't criticise Richard II and hope to get away with it. He would remember, and he would kill you, even if it was years later. With Henry IV, however, he would take personal criticism on the chin. There's no impeachments, government was open, and you could trust Henry IV to do what he said he was going to do. He was fundamentally honest, well-meaning, likeable. He listened, and he was prepared to compromise with people that disagreed with him. He accepted the idea of a loyal opposition, that just because someone thought your ideas were stupid didn't mean that they were disloyal. Richard II never accepted this. He worked through and with his subjects. He wasn't loved, but he was respected. Now he spent most of his reign, however, dealing with rebellion, because after all, he had only a tenuous claim to the throne. He'd seized power from Richard II and then starved him to death. On the other hand, as a piece of trivia, he's the only king of England to be visited by a Byzantine emperor. You might say, who are the Byzantines? A lovely empire. When they divided the Western and the Eastern Roman empires apart, the Byzantines are the Eastern Roman Empire. This might surprise you, but there is still a Roman Empire at that stage. A tiny remnant, the city of Constantinople, and a few villages in Greece is all that's left of it. Well, the heir of the Roman emperors comes to England to visit Henry IV to beg for help against the Turks, which we're in no position to give them. As it happens, Henry IV keeps control, and he crucially passes the throne on to his son when he dies. And this will be the great remembered Henry V, who reigns from 1413 to 1422, and tragically will die at the age of 35, but will still be remembered as one of our greatest ever kings. Henry V, who is he? Well, he is able and successful, and a master of propaganda, which is probably why we got such a great view of him, even hundreds of years later. He's a highly autocratic king, much like Richard II in that way. He takes personal control of church and state in a way that Richard II could only ever have dreamed of. He is a successful autocrat in that. And he provides unity, and he gets on well with the nobility in a way that Richard II didn't, because the thing about Henry V is he is a consummate war leader. The English aristocracy were not prepared to be ruled by a peaceful dictator like Richard II, but they were going to be prepared to put up with a military dictator like Henry V, because he could get on with the aristocracy, with England's warlike leaders, in a way that had been missing since Edward III. He's charismatic and he inspires total confidence. He is massively over-ambitious and overconfident. Some people say that he's lucky that he died when he did, which is not something you hear very much about people, because he died at the pinnacle of his powers when it seemed like he was conquering all before him, and that maybe he would never have been able to conquer all of France. Maybe he had locked England into its own Vietnam, that he had died right when it appeared to be winning an unwinnable war. He was certainly very high-handed. He purged those he suspected. He was obsessed with conquering France. He was intolerant of criticism. He was intolerant of dissent. And he was impatient with Parliament. But in 1415, he lands in France near Harfleur. He captures the town of Harfleur. And then, while devastating his way through France, he fights the Battle of Agincourt, which of course has gone down in history as one of the great English victories. A tiny English army, starved, riven with dysentery, dying of disease, heavily outnumbered by a fresh, confident French army. And at the Battle of Agincourt, this diseased, downtrodden, tiny English army massacres its far larger, far better equipped French opponent on the field of battle. One of the great victories won by any nation, anywhere, at any time. It's one of those events in military history that just echoes down the ages. The English victory at Agincourt. Although there'll be many people watching this video will be upset about it being called English, for of course the Welsh always claim Henry V was a Welshman. He was born in Monmouth, and there was an awful lot of Welsh people fighting in this army against the French. But after this great victory, in 1420, the French sign the Treaty of Troyes. The French king, who's mad, he thinks that he's made of glass, and he's terrified that if he falls off a horse he'll shatter. He says that Henry V can marry his daughter, a woman called Catherine of Valois, and that as soon as the old French king, and the French king, Charles VI, he's an old man, he's ill, he says, as soon as I die, France can be ruled by you, Henry V. And so the Henry V has successfully united the royal families of England and France once again. And surely the old French king, who's already ill, will die before Henry V, who's in his 30s. And they'll have children, and England and France will be forever united, and all be rivers of chocolate and people skipping through meadows. But tragically, in 1422, Henry V will die at the age of 35. And there will be no united England and France. There is an English government ruling France, and he does pass on the crown to his son, the baby Henry VI. But will this baby be able to hold on to England's conquests in France? And so now we get to the beginnings, I suppose, of the War of the Roses, the first reign of Henry VI, 1422 to 1461. Henry VI comes to the throne at the age of 9 months, our youngest ever king. And as they say famously, woe to the land where the boy is king. But at the accession, there's no real problems. People accept the fact that he is the son of the king and will be our next king. Henry V's brother, the Duke of Bedford, was put in charge of the war against France as senior regent. The Duke of Gloucester, who's also Henry V's brother, is made protector and head of the government in England.